The next thing that we're going to do is change the opacity of a layer. So you'll notice that this layer, the postage layer, is very dark and black. So we can change the opacity of that layer in our layers panel. So right here where it says opacity, you have to make sure you have that layer selected. I can click that and drag that little slider down to about 25%. And then you can see that it's see-through now. The next thing that we're going to do is hide all of these layers for a moment except for the pineapple layer. We're actually going to duplicate this layer and then apply a blending mode to it. So there's a number of ways that you can duplicate layers. When you have that layer selected, you can go up to Layer, Duplicate Layer, or I could go to my panel menu and duplicate the layer here. And I could also click and drag this onto the new layer icon and it makes a copy of it. You won't notice it because they're exactly the same picture right on top of each other. But now we're going to start playing with the blending modes and you're going to see how these change it. Right now the blending mode is normal. Blending mode means it's going to blend with the layer underneath it. So if I click on this, I can kind of scroll through these and see which each one of these blending modes does. Some of them don't do a whole lot, it just depends on the images that you're trying to blend together. But you can see some of these change the images quite a bit. They want us to use overlay. What overlay does is it just really darkens up those shadows, brightens up those highlights, and makes the colors really pop. So if I hide that layer, there's my original image, and make that overlay layer visible again, and you can really see the difference between those two images. The next thing I'm going to do is bring that beach photo layer back up. We're going to resize that and rotate it. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, Scale, and we're going to grab that bounding box and oops, I'm on the wrong layer. On the beach layer, and go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and we're going to reduce the size of this. Again, just like in the first tutorial, you want to make sure that that little box is checked up there to keep your proportions the same. So about 50%, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're also going to rotate this. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, rotate it, and we're going to rotate it to the right about 15 degrees. And you can see the degrees in the corner as I rotate this. So just about 15 degrees. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to apply that by hitting the check mark or hitting return on your keyboard. We're then going to bring that flower layer and make that flower layer visible. We're going to make sure that we hit save on this. We've already saved it once, so we should be able to do Command S or just do File Save, and it will save as the file name that we created last time. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply a filter to part of the image. There's lots of different filters in here, but we're going to play around with the render filter. So what we're going to do is create a new layer. I'm just going to click New Layer, and it's going to create a blank layer right here with no name applied to it yet. We're going to rename that Clouds. So again, just double click on the word, and it will name it Clouds. And then over here in our toolbox, we want to make sure we have our foreground color and our background color. Our background color is probably white already. If it's not, you can double click on it, drag up to the corner, and then with the foreground color, we want to make that a blue, a nice sky blue. So as I click around here, that's a little purple. Maybe come down here, a little bit more of a sky blue here. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no, they do give you numbers that you could put in here. They give you RGB numbers. So if you want to get it perfect, like the tutorial, For the red, the R, you're going to type in 48. For the green, you're going to type in 138. And then for the blue, it's 174. And that's the blue that they want you to have. But just as long as you have something close to it, hit OK. So now you can see the blue and the white for our colors. And we're going to go up to Filter, Render, Clouds. This is actually going to make some clouds, pretty realistic looking clouds. If you go under Filter, Render, you can also make flames and trees and some lens flares and some lighting effects. There's a lot of really cool filters in here that you can just kind of play with and check out as well. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we want to put that behind the pineapple. So we can make this longer by dragging the bottom of this down, and we want to put this behind the pineapple but not behind the background. But we want that sky to be behind the pineapple. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the other flower picture. So we're going to try to do this in a different way. We'll go to Finder, and we will go to Desktop. And I'm going to find my Photoshop Classroom in a Book. I'm going to go to Layer Basics. And there's that other flower in here. We're just going to click and drag that in here. So again, there's a number of ways to get other images in there. And we're going to bring that above the beach. Nope, just below the beach layer, but above the pineapple layer. And we're going to move this down here into the corner. Doesn't matter quite where, just down in that corner. Now we're going to add some text. So I'm going to take the Type tool, looks like a T, and I am going to make the Hawaii layer visible. And just under that, I am going to add the words Island Paradise. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to click my foreground color, and I'm going to pick a grassy green, something really pretty and funky. Then I'm going to open my character panel. So I'm going to go to Window, Character. I can pull this up here so it's more accessible. And I'm going to change my font. So right here, I'm going to change that font to Birch. Oops, let me double click that again. Birch Standard, and that will pop up here. I'm going to change my font style, or keep my font style at regular. I'm going to change my font size to 36 points. And right here, this is my anti-aliasing. I want that to be sharp. I believe that just makes the edges. We'll learn more about that later. That's going to be this one right here. So it looks like a little VA with a line underneath it. We want that to be 250. And then we want to use all caps. We want the faux bold. If I hold my mouse over these, there we go. We want this one, the faux bold. So it's going to make it look kind of bold. Then I'm going to take that Type tool and click just below the word Hawaii. And you can see it's going to put in some dummy text that's called lorem ipsum. We're just going to type in a space between those two words. And then I'm going to use my Move tool just to kind of center it underneath the word Hawaii and not have it too close to the word Hawaii. Now I'm going to apply a gradient to the Hawaii layer. So I need to select the word Hawaii. There's a couple of ways that you could do this. If I go to the Hawaii layer, I could take my magic wand tool and I could choose add to selection and I could select all the white letters and that will create a selection. I can also right click in the thumbnail and do select pixels and it will select all of those pixels. Now what I'm going to do is apply a gradient. A gradient is when you've got one color that goes to another color very smoothly. So I'm going to go to Window, Gradients. And this is a little new. It looks like there's some oranges in here. So this would be a little different than the book. We've got some pre-done gradients in here. I'm going to click this one, but I need that to be orange. Actually, I'll just go into the oranges, maybe. This is kind of new, so what happens if I change this to orange? There we go. So I just go down here. This was new to me. So I go down here, change my foreground color, and it changed my basics up here. Now what I can do as well is when I go to apply that gradient, if I use my gradient tool, if I click and drag, I can change, maybe I can't change the direction of that gradient. You used to be able to. But that's good there. We just want the orange near the bottom. That is going to be a little bit different than what's in your book, because the book is a little bit older. All right, now we're going to apply a layer style to some of our text. So layer styles can be things like drop shadows, strokes, things like that. So we're going to go to our text layer, our Island Paradise layer, and we're going to double click on that. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up our layer styles. So we are going to choose drop shadow. So I want to click on drop shadow, not just the box, because then I get options for drop shadow. We want to make sure the blend mode is multiply. The opacity is at 75%. Or close. The angle is 78 degrees, and to change that angle, you can just drag this around, but we want that to be about 78 degrees. Close, doesn't have to be perfect, or you can type it in there. Our distance is going to be 5 pixels. Our spread is going to be 30%. That's just how faded the edges are. And then our size is going to be 10. You can kind of see in the preview down there what it's doing to it. I'm going to hit OK. So we've got a drop shadow underneath that text now, which makes that a lot easier to read. And I can actually hide that effect in my layers panel, which is pretty cool. Now I'm going to apply that same layer style to my Hawaii layer. So what I just did, it's not showing up very well though. Let me undo that. going to have to go back into my history panel. There we go. So that took me back to where I was previously. I want to bring that one back up, and I should be able to hold Option and drag this effect up to my Hawaii layer. There we go. I think I had it on the wrong layer before. So now that same effect is on my Hawaii layer. The next thing I'm going to do is put a stroke around the word Hawaii. So I'm going to add a layer style to this. I'm going to close some of these panels. They're a little bit in the way. So on the Hawaii panel, I'm going to do a layer style. So I can double click on this. I could go up to layer, layer style, and then choose one of these. Or I can also go down to, I believe, this button here. So we're just going to double click on this, and we're going to choose stroke because there's already a drop shadow. We're going to click on stroke, and you can see it put an outline around that. Our size is going to be 4, so you can just type that in there. The position is going to be on the outside now, so you can see how that jumps to the outside of that image. Our blending mode is going to be normal. Our opacity will be 100%. Then we're going to choose a color green. Something similar to the Paradise that we used before. We're going to hit OK and hit OK again. The next thing we're going to do is put a drop shadow on the flower. So go to the flower layer, double click to get our layer styles. We're going to do drop shadow. We want opacity to be 60%, distance to be 13, the spread to be 9%, and we're going to hit OK. And now we have a drop shadow under here. It's a little bit softer and lighter than the Island Paradise one. Then we're also going to add a satin layer style to this as well. So I just double clicked on that again, and they want us to click on satin. And if we pull this down, you can see what that's doing to it. And the color is going to be kind of a fuchsia color. So it's kind of a purplish color. And you can kind of, as you pick around on here, you can kind of play around with that and see what it does to your image. And we want the opacity to be 20%. And we want the distance to be 22 pixels. And you can kind of see if I hit the satin button, just kind of made it a little bit more, the color a little bit more intense. Make sure you save that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the color of the other flower. Right now it's purple. We're going to make it a color that looks more similar to the color that we have there. So I'm going to click on flower 2, and I'm going to go to the adjustments panel, and you can do all sorts of adjustments in here. You can do brightness and contrast levels, curves, exposure, vibrance. We're going to do hue and saturation. And what we're going to do then is change the hue. So the hue is the color, and watch these flowers down here. We're going to change the hue to 43, which is going to, oops, I have that on the wrong layer. So what I just did is I created a clipping mask with this. So this was applying to, so watch what happens. So this was adjusting everything that was under this layer. I don't want it to adjust everything. I want it to adjust just the flower layer. So if I hold Option and click right between the two layers, see how my cursor changes to a little box with an arrow on it? Hold Option and I'm going to click, and it puts a little arrow on here. So now it's only affecting this layer. This is called an adjustment layer. Adjustment layers are really nice because it's not modifying the original layer. It's just making a layer above it that's going to adjust it. So you can see if I turn that off, it goes back to the original image. So now I'm going to go in here, and they wanted me to use 43 for the hue. Saturation, that's how intense the color is. I want that at 19. And then the lightness is going to stay at 0. And now those colors are a little bit more similar than they were before. The next thing that we are going to do is we're going to add a border to this. So the whole thing. We're going to go up to Select All. It's going to select everything. And then we're going to go to Select, Modify, Border. We want that to be 10 pixels wide. We're going to hit OK. And you can see that there's now the selection has come in 10 pixels. You're going to make sure that your foreground color is white. Just double click on it. Make sure you drag that all the way up to the corner. And now we're going to go to Edit, Fill. And we're going to hit foreground color for our contents because we want it to be that color. We're going to hit OK. I believe I needed to do that on a new layer. Let me try that again. Now we'll fill that with our foreground color, which we want to be white. That's yellow. We want that to be. With my foreground color, it's now white, and I need to bring that all the way up to the top. I need to name it border. I want to bring that postage layer and make that visible. And it looks like it's going down this area. Deselect. And then you're going to save it. It's going to ask you to flatten the image. I do not want you to flatten the image. So you're going to skip page 118. Just go ahead and save it. And then you're going to email it to me. So go to your email. Go to Compose. Type in my name. Make sure your subject is Layer Basics. Go to the paperclip. Go to your desktop. Find your Photoshop tutorials. There we are. And then Layer Basics, and you want that final file that you made. Hit open. It's a big file, so it might take a little while. You're going to hit send. If it tells you the file's too big and it's going to send it as a Google Drive document, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. And then you are done with that tutorial.